And a very good morning and welcome to EVM Mornings. This is the Pulse TV, and we really love to go into communities and see what's going on in the community. And in Bend, Oregon today, which is our home base. By the way, do want to mention that we're going to be moving to Albany here in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to be basing our operation out of there. Still doing our web presence. We do plan on coming back to Bend and visiting when events are happening in Bend and when there's town hall forums and so on and so forth. We are looking forward to coming back in Bend and visiting our old stomping grounds of Bend, Oregon. We are this morning talking to Ron Wilkinson, the Bend LaPine Superintendent. Ron, glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Dave.
First of all, congratulations. I understand that you are Superintendent of the Year in the state of Oregon.
That was a pretty nice honor I just received a couple weeks ago.
And what was that selection based on? What do they look for in a Superintendent of the Year?
The criteria basically is involved in terms of the leadership that you're doing in your district. Obviously, it's based heavily on the work that a whole lot of people in this district are doing that are producing some pretty great achievement gains with our kids and closing the achievement gap. It's also involved in terms of involvement in the community and other kinds of activities, just sort of the overall community person as well.
Okay. What are some of the achievement gains in the Bend LaPine School District? What have you guys done there?
Well, over the last decade, a decade ago, we were below the state percentages, meeting and exceeding in reading and math, and now we consistently outperform the state. And we have gained every year in the last decade the percentage of our students meeting and exceeding. And at the same time, we've significantly reduced the gap for particularly our economically disadvantaged students, and they're performing almost at the same level as non-economically disadvantaged. We are proud of the work that's gone on in terms of significant expansion of our advanced placement programs at the high school, and then the International Baccalaureate program that we're now offering at Bend Senior High. In addition, we have had our students earned over 5,000 college quarter hours of credit last year through dual enrollment programs with our community colleges. So just a lot of activities like that have raised the bar and moved our students forward towards our goal of having them college career ready when they leave our schools.
Mm-hmm. Economically disadvantaged students, are we seeing a lot more of those in schools in general and Bend LaPine specifically?
In our area, as you know well, the economy has hit hard. Yeah. And just 5 years ago, just over a third of our students were eligible for free and reduced lunch. That's now 48 or 49% this year. So
just about half.
Almost a 50% increase in terms of free and reduced lunch.
Now, I know my daughters are 22 and 18, and it seems like the line is kind of becoming somewhat blurred between high school and college. When I was in high school, I graduated in '78, so it's been a few years ago. Mm-hmm. The line seems to be becoming somewhat blurred between high school and the advancement into college and university, community colleges, and a lot of high school students. It seems like these days, are taking college courses while still in high school. That's
true. As I said, our students earned over 5,000 hours of credit last year. Mm-hmm. But I think that's really fits with the governor's agenda. The governor has really advocated trying to align systems all the way from early childhood education clear through post-high school, colleges, and graduate school. And we have a lot of work to do to improve that alignment, but we've made a lot of progress. And what you're referring to, I think, is the progress that's been made. And I think if the governor has his way, that'll be even further merged in terms of the process. Mm-hmm. I think there was a concern for a long time about the senior year, whether it was sort of a extraneous year for some kids, and I think this opportunity of being able to go ahead and earn college credits as seniors is really a positive thing for many of our students.
Let's talk about budgets, funding, and the forecast for this upcoming year. Big question a lot of people have on their minds is, what does the budget picture look like for the Bend School District? Are you going to have to make any cuts? I know it's kind of nobody really knows in their economic crystal ball just how much money is going to be coming into state coffers in this local school district.
Exactly. As we look at next year, right now we're still looking at pretty much flat funding for next year. The economic forecast that was released just a week or two ago was down again, which has been down every single quarter for way, way too long.
Yeah.
But it was down again. But they're still operating within that large reserve that the legislator established at this last session. So at this point, unless the next couple of economic forecasts are down, we're still looking at the same level of funding that we had this year. That's tight because obviously costs are going up. Cost of living's now in the 2 to 3% range, where it was essentially flat too during that period of time with the large downturn, and so our costs are going up, and so it's going to be a really, really tight budget again.
So as we look further ahead into the years to come, if we stay status quo, which is where we are now, where more economically disadvantaged students, more free lunches, the state having to put more people on public assistance roles. In other words, your cost of operating going up and your funding picture going flat. How much longer can we continue this status quo?
I think we're really at that breaking point. As I talk to my colleagues around the state, and being superintendent of the year, but also in my involvement in state activities, I have a chance to visit with a lot of them. And I think across the board, actually at a meeting just a couple of weeks ago, I said, are you feeling the same as I, that for the first time in many years we may not increase in student achievement and may not be able to achieve those same levels as this past year because of the increased class sizes, because of the shorter school years that we've all been forced to do? It's really, really a tight time. I mean, I understand businesses all over our community are dealing with those same issues, but they're dealing with it and having that same struggle. Well, we're struggling with that too. There was a period of time in the early years of this particular recession where I believe that we were able to tighten up and do some things just a little more efficiently. I think we pretty well shot all of those bullets, and there's not a lot left in the chamber right now in terms of ways to make those reductions.
There was a question that was asked on a network news program the other night that I thought was very interesting, and I wanted to pose that question to you, because everybody is looking at essentially the new normal, recreating how we do things, thinking out of the box. The question was posed to a school official: if all of the and obviously the federal government is faced with severe budget constraints as well, so they're looking at ways to reduce funding.
Sure.
So the question was posed to the school official was this: if all of the federal mandates went away, and I guess we'd also take this at state level, if all of the federal mandates went away and they gave more control back to the states and federal funding went away with it, the answer from the school official was that would be a great deal because it costs more to meet the federal mandates than we get from the federal government. So we'd welcome that with open arms. What's your answer to that question?
I'm not sure I'm quite as open arms in terms of that. I think we're all would be supportive of some changes in those regulations and mandates. But when you say all federal funding goes away, realize federal funding is a significant portion of our special ed funding, for example, and our Title I funding, which support our intervention and remedial activities in a lot of schools. And as that disadvantaged population has increased, those dollars really are critical to our work. Now, the requirements tacked behind those, I mean, theoretically, the requirement of special education could go away if we're going to remove federal regulations. Well, for much of what we're doing with special education is absolutely critical for a group of students that were essentially ignored within education systems for a number of years back before the special education legislation passed. I think what we really need is more of a conversation about what's realistic, what's practical, and it's probably some of the heavy-handed kind of regulations that we ought to look at limiting. The trouble with most things is a simple fix is not, when you have something as complex of what we do with education, a simple fix probably isn't there.
Okay. What percentage of your budget is the federal income to your school district?
Now I have to do a little thinking in my head here for a minute. It represents probably in our total revenue about 20% of our revenue is federal revenue.
Okay. How large is your budget?
Our budget's $118 million in the general fund, and so that $20 million would be in addition other funds.
So class sizes right now, we're talking about increasing class sizes. How big on average are classes now, and how much have we seen them grown?
In the one of our biggest impacts has been at the primary level. We worked for a decade to really pull our elementary class sizes, particularly at the primary level, down as part of early reading initiatives, and we had them clear down where we were averaging 18 in our K1 and 20 in our second grades, and those are now at 24. And that's a really heavy impact for teachers. 33% more kids in those K&1s is impacting teachers. At the other levels, it's 3 or 4 kids across the board. And, it's like which 3 or 4 kids are the breaking point is the challenge teachers are facing. In our high schools, we went to a 7-period day, which increased the number of kids that teachers face in a given day significantly. Over the year, it will not increase the number they face, but in a given day, they're facing more kids. A lot of those changes have been as a result of this budget challenge.
Well, that was a rather controversial change, as I recall.
Yes, it was.
How has that worked out this year? This was the first year you did it, right?
This first year in 20 years or so that we've done it in LaPine, yes. I give our teachers and our administrators a lot of credit for working on a change like that. It's significant in terms of rearranging instruction and how you do things. It's particularly challenging for teachers like English teachers, where you have huge numbers of papers to grade, and grading and those writing activities are so important to the instruction, and they're dealing with how do you balance doing that. The trickier part is they now have a full year to do those assignments versus just a half year in the semester system we were on. But it's still completely reorganizing the way they teach and the way they think in terms of preparation for lessons. It's been really challenging for a lot of our teachers. I give them a lot of credit for hanging in and working with it. It allowed us to reduce the number of high school teachers pretty dramatically without increasing our class size on an average at the high school. On the other hand, for a teacher, the number of kids they're facing in a day is still significantly up.
Okay. How is the U.S. school system doing as we compare to the rest of the world?
There's a lot of interesting measures of that. If you look simply on PISA exam, that's the PISA exam, which is one that's used for comparison purposes. In some of the basic areas, the United States looks like they're doing poorly. In a lot of other measures, in terms of teaching kids to be critical thinkers and creative learners and creative people, the United States by far excels the rest of the world. In fact, they all come to the United States to learn how we do that. And so it's this balancing thing, trying to figure out what really is important in the big scheme of things. And I think that we've got to work on that. I think that's been a conversation we've had in LaPine as we've talked about world-class schools, is what's really world-class. We don't think narrowing it down so you only teach English and reading and math is the answer. We think Mountain View's state champion football team this weekend is an important part of the life for those kids for their entire lives. That'll be one of the most important things that they've ever had a chance to be part of. And we know that kids' involvement in activities is one of the most closely correlated indicators of future success in life. And so I don't want to eliminate those kind of programs. If you tighten down and work only about those academic areas, we could have to eliminate those things. I don't want that to happen. So I think trying to maintain that full comprehensive program is really critical to us.
The No Child Left Behind program, that's taken some criticism. Has it been successful?
No Child Left Behind, I could, if you have 2 or 3 hours, I could go into a lot of discussion about it. I'm going to give you the shorter version today. NCLB has done one significant positive thing. It caused schools across the country to look at all students. Where before, when you focused only kind of on averages and didn't talk about what we call subgroups, which is our economically disadvantaged, our special education, our English language learners, those subgroups of population, in the past, before NCLB, those numbers were just merged into an average number, and often you had kids that were just ignored. NCLB has caused us to address the needs of all kids. That's really positive. NCLB, at the same time, has created some challenges in terms that you have states being compared against states when they have completely different measures, and so those comparisons are totally invalid. Schools compared against schools across state lines where the measures are completely different and therefore totally invalid. And definitely a significant increase in the focus on testing, as if testing by itself is what's going to improve education. And I think that those are some of the negative elements. The one-size-fits-all aspect of NCLB is ironic in terms of how that's applied across school systems, that everybody needs to fit this one mold in terms of how they improve, where the very underlying element of NCLB is trying to focus on the differences of subgroups. And so it's kind of ironic in terms of that, and I think that's one of the real challenges.
Are we putting too much pressure on teachers to force, coerce, encourage students to come on, to improve in school? In other words, are parents in some ways abdicating the role and saying, well, teacher, it's your job to teach my kid?
There's 2 or 3 questions, I think, in that one, Dave.
Yeah, I know there is.
In terms of whether we're putting too much pressure on kids to perform, I think that'll be debated as long as you and I live. But I think what we know is setting that bar higher, that people and kids are amazing in terms of how far they can go. And I guess from my perspective, one of the things that I have really emphasized is for many years is I don't want it to be us that somehow set a ceiling for where kids can go. So I really think that part's positive. On the other hand, are parents advocating their role and just sort of saying schools take care of them? I think that happens more and more as we have very busy people in our society.
Yeah.
And particularly when you get into a time of economic challenge that we're dealing with, that people have a lot of other issues that are awfully important in their household. And it's harder and harder for them to make the time to be as involved in their kids' lives in the school as they would like to be. And I guess I just encourage them to still make the time because it's really important in terms of that whole equation.
One of the things speaking of the No Child Left Behind and comparing, just if I could offer a comment or two, I married a woman from New Zealand, and we brought a child over in middle school age and moved to Idaho and then moved to the LaPine School District. And comparing the New Zealand school system to the American school system, both in Nampa, Idaho and Bend, Oregon, my wife and I were extremely impressed with the American school system. I remember there was a meeting in Nampa where our son, I won't use his name, but was having difficulty adjusting culturally, and we found that the learning, the education in America was a full grade level ahead of where he was in New Zealand. And we went into this meeting and there were 10 people gathered around talking about one student. And that really impressed us because that didn't happen in New Zealand. And then when we came to the Ben LaPine School District, I have kudos to the folks at the Pilot Butte Middle School, and I wish I could remember the name of the counselor that really took an interest in his education, really encouraged him, and I think was a huge turning point in him getting to the point where he was succeeding in school, where he would have been one of those students that would have been left behind. And so when people are critical of the American school system, I said, well, my experience has been quite the opposite, that they really stepped it up, and they just encouraged and worked and didn't give up, and really cared about the student. And so I have to congratulate the Bend School District and the Nampa School District for their work, especially the folks. Again, I wish I'll have to share the name of the counselor because she was very, very good.
The thing that's interesting, you know that we have a teacher exchange program with Yangzhou, China. So we have a Chinese teacher here each year, and then we send a teacher to China as well. We've been doing that now for 4 years, but a year ago, Vicki Van Buren, our chief of our high school programs, along with me and the high school principal at Summit, went to China and had a chance to visit them as well. And the things we learned even more than we already knew about the Chinese system is that, yeah, there's a lot of accolades in terms of math and science achievement and so on, but there's a huge cost that goes on in terms of that, in terms of the huge pressure that's on kids to meet that mark in that regard, and a lot that their suicide rates are significantly higher than the United States, and I think we just have to be careful that we don't get this out of balance, that all of a sudden we create a mentally ill society because of the pressure to succeed, at the same time that we're trying to encourage kids to do their best work. The thing that was interesting is that the narrower focus of their instruction is really clear. The idea of sports and other kinds of activities just is foreign to them in terms of most of what they're doing. It's like, they might do that on weekends, but they also may have school on Saturday as well, and so it's even limited in that regard. But the other piece, and it's back to that parent involvement issue, and probably the greatest aha of all for us was understanding the impact of that one-child law in China, where they can only have one child, is that you have only one kid in your family that you're worried about, but you also have 4 grandparents of that one child that are really involved and focused on that child's success. And so all of your hopes and dreams for your kids are all rest in one individual. You think of your kids, and if they're like my kids, some are a little more involved in arts and fine arts and dance and those kind of things. Others are involved in more in terms of math and science and those areas, and athletics. And I have 3 kids, and they're all very different. And there you have one shot, and that one child has to be your hopes and dreams in terms of arts, athletics, academics, and all those things come together. And so there's a lot of interest and support and expectations based on that one child.
There could be a lot of pressure on that one kid.
Absolutely, huge pressure in terms of that one child.
Because in China, the heritage and the family line is very important.
Exactly.
And so I can see why the suicide rate would be very, very high. I've never been to China, but that was my experience in the New Zealand school system.
That's interesting.
Yeah. If you had to give a grade in 3 categories, the national United States education system, the state, and the LaPine School District, like an A, B, C, D, F, what would you give, first of all, to the nation? If you had to give it a grade.
Yeah. I think the nation is probably more in the C to C plus range in terms of where we are, and the real challenge, I got to add that my comment there, is that where we see the greatest challenge in American education is in the inner city school systems. And actually most of the documentaries that you watch and hear in terms of education are telling the story of failures of inner city schools. When you get out of those inner cities, you tend to find systems that are thriving much better. And so I guess that's why I would put them in the average range in terms of a grade.
Is it more parent involvement as you get in the more rural school districts than there's more parent involvement? Is that key?
Parent involvement is absolutely critical to our success. I mean, the partnership we have with parents is a large part of why we are being successful with kids.
State level.
State level, I think we're working hard in Oregon. I'm involved in a lot of that work, so I can't be too critical, but we have a lot of room to go. But I'd put us in the B range at the state level, probably a low B. We've made some pretty significant improvement, but we have a long ways to go. And
what areas?
We have a real challenge in Oregon of how do you deliver that same quality of education to every nick and cranny of our state. We have 197 school districts, and they're from about 5 or 6 kids up to 45,000 kids in size, and so their capacity of what they can do varies significantly. That's one of the challenges. The other, and so it's finding a better way of delivering and supporting education everywhere is one of the challenges. Getting a better handle on really what it is we expect is important, and aligning our systems better with national systems, and that work is underway right now. And then funding of education in Oregon is atrocious, where we continue to be in the lower quarter in the nation in terms of funding education. We're almost at about a 50% of what the funding is in Maryland, for example, for education. And then it's just, as we talked about, we're trying to do the absolute best with what we have, but those limitations are there.
What should we do before we go to the local school district? Let's talk about funding issue. What do you think we should change in the state of Oregon?
Part of it is rethinking our priorities. Just as a percentage of the general fund, the amount of funding for K-12 education has dropped 5%. So this is of the available 100% of money in the state of Oregon in the last 8 years. 8 years ago, it was over 44% of it going to support K-12. In this biennium, it's about 38% of the available money. So yes, state revenue is tight and down, but part of the challenge in K-12 is that we're not getting the same share of what was available that we got even in the previous bienniums. And so that's a major challenge is reprioritizing education and making sure we're putting the money there. The other needs are great. I don't want to minimize the needs in human services. The biggest pressure has been ballot measures that have shifted significant resources to prisons and law enforcement. And so the prioritization has shifted dollars both to human services and to corrections, and that's come out of education. Both K-12 education and higher education, in many respects, our funding of higher education is even more atrocious than our funding of K-12 education as a state. And I think those are major, major concerns there.
What would you say to the critics who say we need to, instead of just throwing more money at the problem, we need to be more efficient in how we spend it?
I don't think there's any question about the need to improve efficiencies. At the same time, one of the things this recession has done is it's caused every institution to really improve efficiencies. I wouldn't suggest that there's no more efficiencies to be gained, but I think the majority of what any of us have been able to identify have been realized in that period of time. It's probably part of what the governor's advocating is trying to find efficiencies across the systems, making sure that we're aligned in terms of outcomes, so that early childhood is really focused on that readiness to learn, readiness to be able to learn to read, so when kids come to school, they're much better prepared, and have a little more of a literacy-rich early childhood background. And then it's really critical for us to make sure we have the pieces in place when our graduates leave school, that there's less need for remedial courses at the college level. And so, it truly is coordinating across systems. I think there is efficiencies to be gained there, much as what the governor is advocating. And so I think that work can be done, but I think a lot of that work on efficiencies. Well, actually, another example that's going on right here in Central Oregon, through High Desert ESD. High Desert ESD is an ESD that just serves Deschutes and Jefferson County directly. Deschutes and Crick County directly. Jefferson County partners with us in many activities. But they have a shared services model right now in terms of number of the business and support services between Redmond Sisters in Crick County. Interestingly, those three districts, student population is just a little less than LaPine. And so what they're doing is trying to say, okay, if we can operate with services in those three districts at the same cost per pupil that we're doing in a district the size of LaPine, then we can make some improvements in terms of efficiencies. And so in some respects, we're being held as sort of the benchmark that they're benchmarking against in that. But in that process, and they're in the first year really of delivering those services, but they've been able to reduce costs to those other three districts in that process. So there's an example, is just trying to find the economy of scale and where it is. The interesting piece is in that study that was done by Eco Northwest, they found that in many respects that when you got over about 10,000 students, there you were kind of at that key point in the economy of scale, so that just getting bigger didn't necessarily improve efficiencies. And so, in our case, where we're about 16,000, we're kind of in that core range of size where we can be efficient if we just make the effort to be there. But trying to help some of those smaller districts provide some services in a more efficient manner is one of those things that's happening. And I think those opportunities are huge across the state.
Okay, report card. Ben LaPine School District, A, B, C, D, F. Well, how are we doing?
Oh, I think we're in the B plus A minus range. I mean, in all honesty, we're performing at a pretty high level, both compared to other districts in Oregon, but also across the nation in many areas. And so, I mean, I'm not in the A plus range at all, because we have a lot of room still to go, and we're working hard to get there. But I think that this is a district that is respected widely across the state for the work that we're doing. So I'd get us probably up in the A minus range.
Okay. So let's revisit the funding issue once again, the forecast. The economic forecast, when is that coming out again?
It's coming out in early February this year. Normally it's late February, but with the legislature going into session in the first part of February, they're going to have the economic forecast right when they start. So they've actually moved up their timeline.
What is the budget priorities as far as K-12 this next session coming up?
In this session, remember, this is the first year of the annual sessions. And so they've established a biennial budget that actually covers us through next year. So the major things they'll look at in February is whether they need to change those budgets. Otherwise, the budgets will go forward. So from a standpoint of this session, the things I'm working on, and I'm working really closely with Representative Conger right now on a bill related to PERS costs. The retirement system costs, the employer portion of that went up dramatically during this current biennium. In our case, that was a $5.5 million a year increase in that one item, which is one of the major challenges we faced. And so Representative Conger and I have been working on some ideas, working with the input from the Portland City Club study and some other studies of PERS, trying to find some ways to make some further adjustments in the PERS system that could pull those costs back down. And so from my standpoint, one of the highest priority this session is trying to free some money that we can spend on other things in our system by reducing that PERS rate.
So the PERS cost to your school district has gone up 5.5%?
$5.5 million
$5.5
this
million.
year.
Percentage of the, what percentage was that?
That's over about 5% of our budget.
Okay. And what
at
was
a
the
time that our budget was reducing.
What was the percentage of the increase?
Oh, it was a 100% increase.
Oh, whoa!
Yeah, it was a 100% increase in PERS.
Now, it's interesting to me as we look at retirement funds all across the nation. In fact, some municipalities, some governments are looking at declaring bankruptcy because they're just being strangled by the cost of retirement. And in the past, it was essentially, let's admit it, it was used as a bargaining chip. And in order to save money today, they made a better retirement package. Well, essentially the debt's coming due, and we're realizing that long term that may not have been a good strategy. And so with the perfect storm that's arrived with the budget, the financial downturn, all of a sudden we have these high retirement costs that we have to continue funding going forward. That's really created the problem for all municipalities, hasn't it?
It has across the board. All of them are facing those higher rates. Excuse me. The difficulty, in 2003, Oregon, led actually by our local representative, Tim Knope, made some pretty significant changes in the PERS system. PERS had went from being very upside down to a point that it was 98% funded in 2008. So in 5 years, those changes made significant changes in PERS. The market downturn took 27% of the principal of the PERS fund. Eliminated it.
Glass of water.
Yeah, I'm going to have to or something.
Okay.
That 27% reduction in terms of your basic fund certainly turned it back upside down. And it will eventually, as the market improves over time, we'll gain back some of that. But the trouble is that there's no fiscal analysts that believe that we're going to earn our way out of that hole right now. That's why Representative Conger is working on his bill that will hopefully make a couple additional fundamental changes that help it to get back on in a balanced form.
Okay.
And it'll get there, if we can be successful making change. The tough part is legislators as a body, have real difficulty understanding the complexity of PERS. They have difficulty understanding what changes they can make and what they can't make. Part of what Representative Congress tried to do with his bill is find the things that the legal counsel says can be done, so that it's not trying to do some things that are never going to hold up.
One last question, then we'll go get a drink of water. If the funding picture continues the same or even drops a little bit, and then your cost of doing business, as everything is going up, are we going to be looking at significant staff cuts or cuts in operations expenses going forward? In other words, are we at that break-even point, or are we at that critical mass point?
We've reduced staff dramatically in the last 3 years. Each year has been a reduction. Actually, I have a graph I use in some of my presentations, and we were growing kind of at this line, and now we've dropped off, and we literally are about where we were in about 2005 in terms of staffing, and we've, over that period of time, we're probably serving about 1,500 more kids than we were back at that point. And so that has impacted us in literally every area. If there's further reductions of funding or flat funding with increasing costs, as you say, there's very few places that we can make those reductions other than in personnel, because we're about 86% of our budget is personnel, and most of the rest of it are fixed costs for energy and transportation and those kind of things. So there's not a lot of opportunities in the other portions of the budget to make the reductions.
The percentage increase in student population has increased what percentage in that time frame we're talking about?
Well, you got to pick which particular period of time. We've grown over time consistently about 3% a year. Mm-hmm. Now that flattened through this recession,
right?
But we only in 1 year did not grow, actually dropped slightly in population. That was 2 years ago. And then the next year, last year, we more than made up for that and grew further than that, and then we grew again this year. We're growing only about 1% a year now, over the last 3 years now, is what that's working out. But our indications down the road is that growth is going to continue at least at that rate, partially because we have really large student population numbers in our primary grades, in our early grades, and so as they work their way all the way up through the system, we're going to have growth. Just even if our base growth rate was 0, we'll have some growth in terms of the number of students we serve.
So, Ron, congratulations on being Superintendent of the Year, and thank you I know you're busy. Thanks for coming in and talking to us this morning.
You bet.
You can see this interview on our website, EVM Pulse.tv. And you can also check it out on YouTube. You can just do a YouTube search for either Ron Wilkinson, Pulse TV, or Bend LaPine School District. And you'll be able to see it in a player window at the bottom of our website at evmpulse.tv. Now, we are moving to Albany, Oregon, and we're in the process of doing that right now. Keep checking our website, all three of them, TJN1.tv, Eagle1.tv, and EVMPulse.tv. We do have a significant event coming up December 7th. It's the 70th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor and World War II at the Bend Elks Lodge from noon to 7 p.m. We're going to do a live webcast. We're going to interview a lot of veterans. The family of Guy Shaw, who was a military photographer for the Army Air Corps, has taken hundreds of pictures in his career. We have a sampling of those. We're going to display them to the public free of charge. We're also going to show videos of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it's going to be a day to honor World War II veterans. Some of the World War II veterans are going to bring some of their artifacts. Some folks, I believe, are going to bring some artifacts from Iwo Jima, and you'll be able to come and talk to veterans and learn more about World War II. And we want to extend an invitation to school districts if they want to bring their classes, their students in to hear the veterans tell their stories. That would be, we would love to see that. So that's going to be this Wednesday from noon to 7 at the Bend Elks Lodge, and many thanks to the Elks Lodge for allowing us to use their facility free of charge, because they as well honor veterans. So that's the next big event we have coming up. It's part of our Operation Eagle's Wings outreach, which is honoring all who serve and leaving no one behind. But keep checking our websites for more details about as we move from Bend to Albany. One of the reasons we're doing that is it gets us closer to Salem, and so we can spend more time covering some legislative issues. And then we, as everyone else, have had some financial issues, and we're combining it with another operation over there to be more efficient. We were
That's
talking about
good.
efficiencies today. So, Ron, we'll both go get a cup of water.
Sounds
and I appreciate
great.
it.
Thanks,
so,
Dave.
you have a great day and stay in touch.